I didn't know my entire relationship was about to end in a four-word sentence, said so calmly it felt like he'd rehearsed it. He called me on a Tuesday night while I was packing for my Friday flight to see him, and I answered smiling, already thinking about the weekend we'd planned, the reservations I'd made, the time off I'd fought for at work. I even asked him which jacket he liked on me, the one he always teased me about stealing his attention. He didn't laugh. He didn't flirt. He didn't say he missed me. He just said, "We need to talk." Those words hit my body before my mind could catch up. My stomach dropped, my palms went cold, and I sat down on the edge of the bed with my suitcase half packed behind me, like a reminder of how sure I'd been. He started talking about thinking a lot lately, about where this is going, and then he said it, like he was listing a problem he'd finally decided to stop tolerating. "You're too sensitive for me. I need distance." Right before my flight, 3 days before I was supposed to land in his city, walk into his arms, pretend long distance wasn't slowly carving holes into us. I waited for the part where he softened it, where he admitted he was scared, where he said he didn't really mean it. Instead, he paused, like he was waiting for me to prove his point, for me to beg, for me to cry, for me to fight. I didn't. I said, "All right." And something in the air shifted. I could almost hear his confusion through the phone. He expected a chase. He expected my panic. He expected me to collapse into the exact version of myself he'd spent months accusing me of being. But I was tired. Not tired of him, not even tired of the distance. Tired of being told that wanting basic communication was a flaw in my character. Tired of apologizing for having feelings. I hung up, stared at my suitcase, and realized something that shocked even me. I wasn't going to cancel anything. I was still getting on that plane. I was still taking that trip. I was still going to live my life like he didn't get to pull the plug and take my plans with him. I didn't know that days later he would show up at my door unannounced, holding something that made him avoid looking me in the eyes. I didn't know he'd come back expecting a second chance, angry that I'd moved on too fast, desperate to make me feel guilty for not falling apart. But I learned quickly, the moment you stop chasing someone who tests your love, they panic. And the moment they panic, they tell you who they really are. I'm 33 years old, and until last week, I genuinely believed I was in a stable, adult relationship. Not perfect, not effortless, but solid. The kind you build slowly, with trust and compromise. The kind you defend when people say long distance never works. We'd been together for almost 2 years. The first year and a half, we lived in the same city. We had routines. Weeknight dinners that turned into late conversations. Lazy Sundays where nothing happened. And that felt like everything. He was confident, charming, in a quiet way. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice or make grand promises, which I mistook for emotional maturity. 6 months ago, he took a job 3 states away. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Just an opportunity. A career move. We talked about timelines, visits, how often we'd see each other. We promised not to let distance turn into silence. I remember telling my friends, "It'll be fine. We're good communicators." I believed that. At first, we were. We FaceTimed at night, texted throughout the day, counted down to visits like teenagers pretending we weren't adults with calendars and responsibilities. I flew out to see him twice. He came back once. Each reunion felt intense, compressed, like we were trying to live weeks of closeness in a few days. Then the gaps started forming. Calls got shorter. Replies came later. Plans shifted. He'd cancel visits because work got crazy. When I asked questions, he'd sigh, like the questions themselves were the problem. "You take everything personally," he'd say. "I just need space sometimes." "You're reading into things." I started measuring my words, waiting longer to text, letting days pass without checking in because I didn't want to seem needy. Every time I swallowed the urge to ask how he was really doing, I told myself I was being supportive, mature, understanding. When he didn't call for 3 days straight, I blamed his workload. When he canceled plans last minute, I told myself flexibility was part of love. When he picked fights over small things, I assumed stress had made him irritable. I ignored the pattern because acknowledging it meant admitting something was wrong. My mom asked once if I felt secure. I laughed it off. "Long distance is just hard," I said. "It's temporary." What I didn't say was how often I felt like I was walking on emotional glass. How every time I asked for reassurance, it somehow turned into a conversation about my flaws. Too emotional, too sensitive, too much. I never thought wanting consistency was a weakness. Looking back, I can see the slow withdrawal, the way he started framing his absence as my problem, the way "I'm busy" turned into "you're suffocating me," the way I kept adjusting myself to fit a version of him that was already pulling away. By the time that Tuesday night came around, the breakup didn't come out of nowhere. It just arrived without warning, dressed up as honesty. I had been planning a visit, a full weekend. Reservations booked, time off approved. I was still investing in a future he had already started distancing himself from. And while I was folding clothes and deciding which jacket to bring, he had already decided to let go. I just didn't know yet that letting go was the kindest thing he could have done. After that phone call, after he said I was too sensitive and needed distance, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling for a long time. My suitcase sat half open on the floor, clothes folded neatly, like evidence of how committed I still was to a future he'd already stepped out of. What hurt most wasn't the breakup itself. It was how familiar his words felt. "You're too sensitive." He'd said versions of that sentence for months, usually after I asked something simple. "Why didn't you call back? Why did you cancel again? Are you okay? Are we okay?" Every time, the conversation would flip. Suddenly, I wasn't asking for reassurance anymore. I was defending my character, explaining that I wasn't trying to control him, that I wasn't accusing him, that I just wanted to feel connected. And every time, I walked away feeling slightly ashamed for having needs at all. Looking back, I can see how carefully the conflict was planted. When he stopped calling, it was because I expected too much. When he pulled away emotionally, it was because I made things heavy. When I noticed the distance, it was because I was overthinking. Nothing was ever his responsibility. Everything circled back to me being too much. Friends tried to tell me gently. They'd ask questions like, "Do you feel like you're always the one adjusting?" Or, "Do you feel calm with him or just anxious but quiet?" I defended him every time. "He's just under pressure. It's the job. Long distance is hard." What I didn't say out loud was that I felt like I was constantly waiting for his mood, waiting for his availability, waiting for proof that I wasn't imagining the disconnect. The breakup didn't happen in a vacuum. It came after months of emotional whiplash. One week he'd talk about future plans, about me moving there eventually, about how proud he was of us for making it work. The next week he'd disappear emotionally, answering texts with one word, postponing calls, sounding irritated when I asked if something was wrong. That inconsistency kept me stuck, hope followed by doubt, over and over again. When he finally said he needed distance, it felt like confirmation of something I'd been afraid to name. That he'd already checked out emotionally, and I'd been the only one still holding the line. But even then, part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I should have needed less. Maybe a stronger woman would have handled it better. That self-doubt was the real seed of conflict. Not the distance, not the breakup. The way I'd been trained to mistrust my own instincts. As the hours passed after the call, I kept replaying his tone. Calm, detached, certain. Like he'd already moved on emotionally and was just informing me of the decision. And yet, there was something strange about how clean the breakup was. No tears, no regret, no discussion. Almost like he expected the aftermath to be louder than the decision itself. That thought stayed with me, because when someone accuses you of being too sensitive, what they're really saying is that they don't want to deal with the emotional consequences of their actions. I didn't know it yet, but that accusation was about to collapse under its own weight. And I was about to see exactly what happened when I stopped playing the role he'd assigned me. The night after the breakup, my first instinct was to cancel everything. The flight, the hotel, the restaurant reservations I'd made weeks in advance, the ones he'd sounded excited about back when excitement still existed between us. I opened my laptop and hovered over the cancellation buttons, heart pounding like I was about to do something reckless. It felt wrong to go. Like going meant pretending I wasn't hurt, like it meant admitting he didn't matter. Then another thought followed, quieter but sharper. Why should I cancel? The flight was non-refundable. The hotel would charge me anyway. And more than that, I had already rearranged my life for this trip. I'd taken time off work. I'd planned it carefully. I'd been looking forward to it in a way that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with finally seeing each other again. If I canceled now, it wouldn't be for practical reasons. It would be punishment, self-inflicted. So I closed the laptop. I went to bed, slept badly, and woke up Wednesday morning with a strange sense of calm. The kind that comes after a decision you didn't know you were capable of making. I went to work like nothing had happened. When my coworkers asked if I was excited about my trip, I said yes. And I meant it, even though the excitement felt different now. When my mom called that evening and asked how my boyfriend was doing, I told her he was fine and changed the subject. I didn't have the energy to explain something I hadn't fully processed myself. Wednesday night, instead of canceling plans, I started replanning them. Same city, different purpose. I pulled up a list of things I'd always wanted to do there, but never mentioned because they weren't his kind of thing. The art museum, a food tour I'd bookmarked months ago, a couple of breweries people kept recommending, a vintage record shop I'd read about online. By Thursday night, my suitcase was fully packed. On Friday morning, I got on that plane. Sitting in my seat, watching the city disappear beneath the clouds, I felt a rush of emotions I wasn't expecting. Sadness, yes, but also something close to relief. I didn't have to coordinate schedules. I didn't have to worry about whether he was in the mood to see me. I didn't have to monitor my tone or pace myself emotionally. I landed, checked into the hotel, and took a long shower like I was washing something heavy off my skin. That night, I went to the restaurant we'd reserved. When the host asked how many, I said, "Just one." They gave me a table by the window. The waiter glanced at the empty chair across from me, then at my face, and softened his voice. He didn't ask questions. I ordered the expensive wine we'd planned to split, and drank it alone. I scrolled through a book on my phone, ate slowly, watched the city outside move on without noticing me. And somewhere between the first glass and the last, I realized something surprising. I wasn't miserable. The weekend unfolded in a way that felt almost rebellious. Saturday, I wandered the museum for hours, lingering in front of pieces I liked, without worrying about whether someone else was bored. I joined the food tour and talked to strangers I'd never see again. On Sunday, I visited 2 breweries, then found the record shop and bought myself a rare pressing I'd been searching for years. Every time the urge to text him rose up, every time I thought about asking why, about demanding answers, I looked around at where I was and what I was doing. And I stayed quiet. I posted a few photos on social media. Nothing dramatic. Just art, food, a record sleeve. No captions about heartbreak. No hints. Just life, continuing. When I flew home Sunday night, I was exhausted in the best way. I collapsed into bed around 10 and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Monday morning, back at work, a coworker asked how the trip was. "Really good," I said. "I needed that." Then she smiled and asked, "How's your boyfriend?" "We broke up," I replied, "but the trip was still great." Her face fell. She apologized, asked if I was okay. And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." That was the moment I knew something had shifted. And it wasn't over yet. Once I was back home, real life resumed the way it always does. Emails, deadlines, grocery runs. But something inside me had changed. The breakup was still there, sitting quietly in the background. But it no longer felt like an open wound. It felt like a truth I hadn't wanted to name. On Monday afternoon, after telling my coworker we'd broken up, I went back to my desk and realized my hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. I wasn't replaying the call in my head anymore. I was just present. That surprised me. I had expected grief to crash into me all at once. Instead, it arrived in waves, short, manageable ones. Moments where I'd remember something small, like how he used to say my name when he was tired, or how we'd argue about which movie to watch. Then the moment would pass. That night, I cooked dinner for myself and ate standing at the counter. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hey, it's me. I'm using my work phone. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen longer than I wanted to admit. Part of me felt that familiar pull, the urge to explain, to clarify, to be understood. The old version of me would have answered immediately, grateful for the chance to talk things through. Instead, I turned the phone face down and went back to cooking. He called twice. I didn't pick up. Then messages started coming through social media. I'd already muted him there without realizing it. His name popped up silently, like a ghost knocking on a locked door. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt tired. Tuesday passed without contact. I went to the gym after work, moved my body until my thoughts quieted down. On the walk home, I caught myself smiling at something insignificant. A dog pulling its owner down the sidewalk, the smell of food drifting out of a restaurant. I was living, and he wasn't part of it anymore. Wednesday evening, I came home around 7. My muscles were sore, my hair still damp from the shower at the gym. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, already thinking about what I'd make for dinner. That's when I saw someone sitting on the floor outside my door. He stood up when he saw me, and that's when I noticed what he was holding. My jacket. The one I'd left at his place months ago, the one he'd promised to mail back, the one I'd forgotten about completely. "Hi," he said quietly, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I needed to see you, to talk to you." "You drove 3 states to return a jacket?" I asked flatly. "No, I mean, yes, I brought your jacket, but that's not why I'm here." I unlocked my door and stepped inside, not looking back. "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "Please," he said, "just 5 minutes." I should have said no. I should have closed the door. But curiosity got the better of me. I left the door open. He followed me in. He looked around like he was seeing the place for the first time, like he was searching for evidence that I'd fallen apart. "Nice trip," he said, his voice tight. "It was great," I replied honestly. "I saw your posts. You went anyway." "Why wouldn't I? Everything was already paid for." He set the jacket on the back of my couch, still avoiding my eyes. "I thought you'd cancel. I thought you'd be too upset to go." "Well, I wasn't," I said. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were red, tired, unsettled. "Did you go to the restaurant?" he asked. "I did." "Alone?" "Yep." Something in his face cracked, just slightly. "You didn't even try to fix this," he said. "You just moved on like I didn't matter." That's when the anger rose, not explosive, not wild, but sharp and focused. "You broke up with me," I said. "You said I was too sensitive. You said you needed distance. What exactly was I supposed to fix?" He swallowed. "I thought you'd fight for me." And there it was. The truth finally spoken out loud. "I thought you'd fight for me." The words hung between us, heavier than anything else he'd said that night. Not "I missed you." Not "I'm sorry." Not "I made a mistake." Just that. An expectation. A standard I'd apparently failed without knowing I was being graded. I felt something inside me tighten, then slowly unravel. "So this was a test?" I asked. He looked away. That told me enough, but he kept talking anyway. "I was scared," he said. "Things were getting serious. The distance, the future, all of it. I panicked. I thought if I pushed you away and you came back anyway, it would prove something." "Prove what?" I asked quietly. "That you really loved me." I let out a short laugh before I could stop myself. It wasn't amused. It was disbelief, edged with something colder. "So you dumped me 3 days before my flight," I said. "Called me too sensitive for having feelings, and expected me to show up at your door and convince you that you were wrong." "When you say it like that, that is how it happened," I cut in. He sat down on my couch without asking, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together like he was bracing for impact. "I realized it was wrong almost immediately," he said. "A couple hours after we hung up. I wanted to call you back, but I thought I should give you space. Then I saw your posts. I saw you went anyway, and I panicked again." "So you drove here?" "Yes. Because I didn't chase you." He nodded. That was the moment the last thread snapped. I'd spent months wondering if I was too emotional, too demanding, too much. And now here he was, confirming that my calm response, my self-respect, had unsettled him more than any argument ever could. I stood there in my own living room, looking at the man who had mattered so much to me just a week ago, and felt absolutely nothing. No longing, no anger, no sadness. Just a deep, bone-level exhaustion. "So what do you want from me now?" I asked. He looked up quickly. "Another chance. I want to start over." "No," I said. He blinked. "Please, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we were good together." "Were we?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, you spent the last 6 months slowly pulling away, picking fights, and making me feel like I was crazy for wanting basic communication. Then you ended things as a test." "That's not how I saw it." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." He stood up and started pacing. "I was dealing with a lot at work." "I know. And every time I tried to be supportive," I continued, "you told me I was being too much. Every time I asked if you were okay, you said I was smothering you." He stopped pacing. "You trained me to stop caring," I said calmly, "and then you got upset when I did." His eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake." "You made several," I said, "and I'm not interested in signing up for more." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flashing across his face. "So that's it? You're just done?" "You were done last Tuesday," I said. "I'm just respecting your decision." Silence stretched between us again. Then he grabbed my jacket off the couch and threw it toward me. It hit my chest and slid to the floor. "You know what?" he snapped. "You're right. You are too sensitive, too rigid, too unforgiving." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm not playing games with people's feelings." He stormed toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. "You'll regret this," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but I doubt it." The door slammed behind him, rattling the frame. I stood there holding the jacket, the one I'd honestly forgotten about, and felt something lift off my shoulders. Not relief exactly, more like clarity. That night, I slept deeply. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages, apologies, accusations, more apologies, then anger, then accusations that I must be seeing someone else. The last one, sent at 4 in the morning, just said, "I'm sorry, I love you, please call me." I deleted them all. At lunch, my best friend called me. "Hey," she said, "your ex just messaged me asking if you're dating someone." "I'm not," I replied. "She's just having a hard time accepting that I didn't chase her." "She's calling everyone," my friend said. "She messaged 3 people this morning." "Great," I muttered. "Tell her I'm fine and to leave me alone." "I already did," she said. She didn't take it well. And that was when I realized this wasn't over yet. Not because I wanted it to continue, but because he couldn't accept that the game had ended. I thought ignoring him would be enough. After that night, after the door slammed, and the jacket lay crumpled on my floor like an afterthought, I believed distance would do the work for me. I believed silence would send a clear enough message that if I didn't respond, didn't react, didn't engage, he would eventually understand and move on. Instead, he escalated. The texts came first. Different numbers. Same tone. Apologies layered over accusations, then apologies again, like he was cycling through emotions faster than I could process them. When I blocked one number, another appeared. When I muted one account, another messaged me from somewhere else. He sent me a playlist on a music streaming app. Our songs, labeled carefully, as if nostalgia could undo manipulation. A day later, flowers showed up at my office. A large bouquet, expensive, impossible to ignore. The card read, "I was wrong. Please forgive me." I threw them away. Not because I was angry, but because I was scared of what it meant that he wouldn't stop. 2 weeks after he showed up at my apartment, my mom called. "Honey," she said gently, "did you and your boyfriend break up?" "Yeah, Mom, 2 weeks ago." There was a pause. "He called me today." My blood went cold. "He what?" "He said there was a misunderstanding," she continued, "that you wouldn't talk to him, and he just wanted to explain his side." I closed my eyes. "Mom, he broke up with me." Then showed up unannounced trying to get back together. "There's no misunderstanding. I just don't want to be with him anymore." She hesitated. "He made it sound like you were the one who ended things." "Of course he did." "Did you tell him anything about me?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I told him I needed to talk to you first. I'll block his number." "Thank you," I whispered. After that call, the weight finally settled in my chest. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about regret. This was about control. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages, records of missed calls, photos of the flowers, notes on dates and times. I didn't want to believe I needed them, but something in me knew better. That night, I sent one final message. "I need you to stop contacting me and the people in my life. What we had is over. If this continues, I will consider legal options. Please move on." He responded immediately. "You'd really do that to me after everything we meant to each other?" "Yes," I replied. "Leave me alone." He didn't respond again. But he didn't stop. A week later, I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop when someone sat down across from me without asking. I looked up, expecting a stranger. It was his best friend. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "I'm not here to convince you to get back together with him," she continued before I could speak. "I'm here to apologize." That caught me off guard. "I encouraged all of this," she admitted. "The breakup test, the showing up at your place. I told him if you really loved him, you'd fight for him." I stared at her, stunned. "I was wrong," she said. "I've been watching him spiral for 3 weeks, and I realized I helped create this mess." She leaned forward. "He's not well. I don't say that as an excuse. I say it as an explanation." I took a slow breath. "That doesn't make it my responsibility." "I know," she said, "and I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to protect yourself." She hesitated, then added, "You might want to consider a restraining order if he doesn't stop." "I don't think he will." I nodded. I had already been thinking the same thing. She stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. He wasn't good to you. I see that now." After she left, I sat there for a long time, staring at my untouched coffee. This was the lowest point. Not heartbreak, not grief. Fear. The realization that saying no to the wrong person can sometimes be the most dangerous thing you do. And that realization forced me to make a decision I never thought I'd have to make. The decision didn't feel dramatic when I made it. It felt necessary. A few days after the conversation at the coffee shop, after the warning from his best friend echoed in my head one too many times, I realized something uncomfortable but undeniable. I had been reacting for weeks, blocking numbers, ignoring messages, hoping silence would end it. But silence hadn't protected me. It had only delayed the inevitable. I needed to draw a line that didn't blur. The breaking point came at the gym. I was finishing a workout, earbuds in, sweat cooling on my skin, when I caught a familiar shape in the mirror behind me. My body reacted before my mind did. My heart jumped. My stomach tightened. He was standing near the entrance, pretending to stretch, eyes scanning the room until they found me. I froze, not because I missed him, because he wasn't supposed to be there. I walked straight to the front desk, checked out, and left through the side exit without looking back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit there for a full minute before I could turn the key. That was it. That night, I spread everything out on my kitchen table. Screenshots, dates, notes, a timeline that told a story I hadn't wanted to believe I was living. I read through it all slowly, objectively, like it belonged to someone else. And suddenly, everything made sense. The breakup wasn't about distance. It wasn't about sensitivity. It wasn't about love. It was about control, about testing, about needing reassurance without offering any in return. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order. I cried afterward, not because I felt guilty, but because I felt sad that it had come to this. Sad that someone I once trusted had pushed me into protecting myself from them. Sad that saying no had been interpreted as an invitation to push harder. When the order was granted, something inside me finally unclenched. For the first time in weeks, my phone was quiet. Days passed without new numbers appearing, without messages slipping through cracks I hadn't noticed before, without the constant background hum of anticipation, of waiting for the next escalation. I slept better, I breathed deeper, I stopped scanning rooms. And in that quiet, I started to see myself clearly again. I wasn't too sensitive, I wasn't difficult, I wasn't wrong for wanting consistency, communication, and respect. I had loved someone who saw my boundaries as challenges and my calm as a failure to perform. That realization didn't make me bitter, it made me steady. A week later, I ran into his best friend again by chance. She told me he'd finally started therapy, that he was being forced to confront patterns he'd never examined before, that he was angry, then ashamed, then quiet. I listened, I nodded. I hope he figures it out, I said honestly, and I meant it. But I also knew something else just as clearly. Whatever growth he found would happen without me. The power didn't come from watching him fall apart. It came from choosing myself without apology. And that choice changed everything. Once the restraining order was in place, the chaos didn't explode the way I'd imagined it might. It didn't end in a dramatic confrontation or a public apology. It ended quietly, the way things do when there's nowhere left to push. For him, though, the fallout was loud. I heard about it in fragments secondhand from people who didn't know how to talk about it without lowering their voices. Friends told me he'd been reaching out to everyone, trying to control the narrative, insisting there had been a misunderstanding, that I'd overreacted, that I'd cut him off without warning. But there had been warnings, plenty of them. The problem was he'd never believed I'd follow through. Once the legal line was drawn, people stopped taking his side so easily. The same friends he'd contacted early on, the ones who'd asked me to just hear him out, started pulling back when they realized this wasn't a messy breakup. It was a pattern that had finally been interrupted. Invitations slowed, group chats went quiet, people became careful around him. He'd tell them he was devastated, that he'd lost the love of his life, and maybe he believed that in his own way. But when questions followed about the test, about showing up unannounced, about calling my family, he didn't have convincing answers. The truth kept circling back. His parents stopped reaching out altogether. I never heard directly from them again. I suspected they'd been told a version of the story that made him look wounded and me look cold. But even that couldn't last forever. Too many details didn't add up. Too many people had seen the escalation. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. My life became smaller and calmer in the best possible way. I stopped checking my phone out of habit. I stopped bracing myself when I heard footsteps behind me. I went back to the coffee shop without scanning the room first. I took my headphones off at the gym. Friends noticed the change before I did. "You look lighter," one of them said over dinner. "You sound like yourself again," another told me. They were right. The woman I'd become during those last months of the relationship, quiet, careful, constantly self-editing, started to fade. In her place was someone steadier. Someone who didn't need to explain her boundaries to make them valid. A month after the restraining order, I heard he'd finally stopped trying to contact me. Therapy had become mandatory rather than optional. According to his best friend, he was starting to see the patterns he'd never questioned before. The way he used distance to feel powerful, the way he mistook pursuit for love, the way he panicked when someone didn't play along. I felt no satisfaction hearing that. Just closure. I didn't want him punished. I wanted him gone. And he was. The strangest part was how ordinary my days became once the drama ended. Work, friends, hobbies I'd neglected, a sense of time that wasn't measured in responses and reactions. I went on a few casual dates. Nothing serious, just conversations that felt easy, unscored. No tests, no power plays, no accusations disguised as concern. And every now and then, I'd notice something small that told me I'd made the right choice. The way my shoulders stayed relaxed in conversation, the way silence didn't feel like a threat, the way I could say no without fearing consequences. The fallout wasn't revenge, it wasn't triumph. It was the quiet return of peace. And that was more than enough. It's been 2 months since the breakup now. 6 weeks since he showed up at my door holding a jacket like it was a key back into my life. A month since the restraining order finally made the noise stop. And for the first time in a long time, my life feels quiet in a way that isn't empty. I didn't rebuild myself overnight. There was no dramatic glow-up montage, no sudden transformation into someone unrecognizable. What changed was simpler than that. I stopped doubting my own reality. I stopped asking myself if I was too much for wanting to be treated with care. I started trusting the version of me who noticed the red flags instead of apologizing for them. I've been seeing friends more, saying yes to invitations without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I picked up a new hobby, something I'd always wanted to try, but never did because it didn't fit neatly into anyone else's schedule. I went on a few casual dates, nothing serious, just conversations that felt easy and honest. No tests, no power plays, no emotional chess. Last week, I ran into his best friend again at the same coffee shop where she'd warned me. She told me he'd finally started making progress in therapy, that he'd accepted we weren't getting back together, that he was working on himself. I told her I was glad, and I meant it, not because I want him back, not because I feel responsible for his growth, but because holding on to resentment would tie me to a chapter I've already closed. I learned something important through all of this, something I wish I'd known earlier. When someone tells you that your emotions are the problem, pay attention. When someone creates distance and calls it space, then punishes you for respecting it, that's not confusion, that's control. And when someone tests your love by withdrawing theirs, the only winning move is not to play. I kept the jacket, by the way. It's a good jacket. Warm, comfortable, familiar in a way that no longer hurts. I wear it sometimes on cool mornings, not as a reminder of him, but as proof that not everything connected to a painful chapter has to be thrown away. Some things can be reclaimed. I don't regret getting on that plane. I don't regret not chasing him. I don't regret choosing peace over performance. Best decision I made was living my life like I didn't need to earn my place in someone else's story. Because the right people don't test your love. They don't disappear to see if you'll chase. They stay. And now, so do I, with myself.